One of my viewers, Mr. Tom, sent me a listing video that he wished for me to review after me reviewing my first drone video. So I'm super excited. This is the first one that someone sent to me. So we're going to watch it together and then I'll give you my thoughts on it, what we can improve on. I have not watched this video yet, so this is going to be a blind react. All right, so let's give this a watch and we'll see what we think.
Hey, Paul Schlafer with Moccasin Creek Real Estate. I'm at 611 Witter Street in Wisconsin Rapids. It's a really historic home with original woodwork, fireplace, great location. Check it out.
So those intros are actually harder to do than most people think that they are. I would have done, I'm not sure if you have an ND filter or whatever, but I would have done outside, having your subject be, kind of a few steps up, kind of as like a wonky view where they're kind of up higher. So the camera's tilted up. So they're kind of looking down. It's kind of uncomfortable for the viewer. Whereas if you did it and then like, I see that the front of this house is super beautiful. So just in the entryway, and then the intros, you want to have at least some thought go into them. And I understand how it is. Like sometimes you'll just be going to a listing and then the agent's like, can I talk on camera? And then you're like, okay, so you weren't prepared at all for it. Maybe it was windy outside and that's why you didn't do it. But for the future, if we go back and look here, this isn't a great place to do this introduction. And I would even have it be a wider shot where the camera is just on a tripod. You don't have to be holding on a gimbal it introduces some camera shake and all that. This is decent, but it definitely looks like no thought went into this portion of it. So it could increase tenfold in quality just by putting a little bit more thought into the set, especially when a subject is involved, especially when the beginning of a listing video is something like this. Then you'll want to put a little bit more thought into it because this is going to be the first introduction, the first thing that someone is going to see of this house. So if this shot isn't good, then they might assume that the rest of the house isn't good and then they, won't watch it or whatever. It's decent. I mean, it's good. The audio doesn't sound terrible. I would have gone for a more pleasing set just to make it stand out a little bit more. So let's keep going.
Really historic home with
also, the introductions that I've done, they're a pain. They're a pain to do. I don't like doing them. Like every time an agent is like, should I do an introduction? I'm always like, you don't have to. If they insist on doing like an introduction, sit down with them beforehand and write down a script and have them run through it a few times, even if it's something simple like, welcome to 611 Winter Street, Wisconsin Rapids. This 4-bedroom, 1.5 bath is amazing. It's an old colonial style. Can't wait for you to check it out. As long as they can just get it going so you don't have to do a cut, you just want to run through it a few more times just to make sure they have it going. The only time you would film it on a gimbal is if they want to do a thing like they're walking down the street towards the house and then you're walking backwards behind them and then they're talking like situated in this beautiful historic neighborhood with lake nearby, that kind of stuff. So let's keep watching. Tom, you said that this was your third time ever using the drone in a listing video. So congratulations. Hats off to you. It's you're getting good. This one, it's a really good shot. I'd be interested to know what frame rate you're using because it looks a little bit choppy. Whereas if you film it in 60 frames per second and edit it on a 30 FPS timeline, and then depending on what video editing software you're using, whether it's Final Cut Pro or DaVinci Resolve or Premiere Pro, I'm just going to go on a limb and assume that you're using Premiere Pro. When you import that footage, the 60 frames per second footage, you'll want to interpret the footage. You have to right click in your little media file in the bottom left, right click on the source media that you want to change, right click and hit interpret footage, and then it'll give you a desired FPS. Change that to 30. So then it'll slow the footage down by half. And then that will give you the 50% slow-mo. That's a lot smoother. This looks like you might have filmed in 30 frames per second and tried to go a little bit slower, or maybe it's just the compression of the video, whatever, but there's just a little tidbit for you. I did notice that in this clip specifically, we'll watch it. Right there, you tried to correct. Right there, you tried to correct the drone's location. I talked about this in the video that I just did, is that if you're doing a specific movement, you want to have the input stay consistent the entire time. If you mess up or you have to do a correction, just go back and start that again. You'll get to the point where you don't need to practice anymore, and just every movement that you'll do, you'll know exactly where to put your thumbs. So that's just a smooth, consistent movement. But you don't want to ever start a new movement during a clip. So if you're going through and you're kind of turning, all of a sudden just turn the camera and then go a certain way, you don't want to do that. Have that be a new clip. So if you're running through, just maintain that. If you mess it up, just go back and try it again. So this clip would have been completely fine if you cut it like right there before it like does this, kind of stops and then you cut it. So having it just be a smooth motion will work to your favor. This one, that's decent. I would have applied a warp stabilizer just to stabilize it because you can see the drone kind of moving left and right a little bit. The way that I do my drone movements is typically like I'll do the establishing shot, like maybe a little bit further back than this one is, just to show here's the house, here's the neighborhood. And then you could do a shot where you're just going straight up. That's a really simple shot, but if you're not, used to using your drone, then it's totally fine to use simple shots. And then once you're up there, I would fly maybe 400 feet away and then like fly towards the house and then have like a little arrow pop up is like, this is where it's at. And then you go back down to do this shot and then you continue on to the rest of the listing video. Because the aerial's purpose, it's not just to show like what the roof looks like or cool, we're looking at the house from above. It's to show the surrounding area. So like right here, there's a really cool river. It's like you could have flown from that bridge over here on the right, all like maybe about, this high, flown all the way over here, doing a gentle turn towards the house, and then kind of zoomed in forward. But overall, fine. This is fine. I'd be curious to know what gear you're using specifically, because the highlights in this are really blown out and the shadows are really dark. So, I understand why you might have exposed it this way to see more of the house without these crazy dark shadows. If you have a new iPhone, I would recommend just using your iPhone to do listing videos like I do. It gives, much just like, I'm not sure why the dynamic range is so stark here. Maybe lift the shadows a little bit in whatever editing program you use and decrease the highlights a little bit. The data on this, like this, the blown out highlights, you lose that. So you want to expose a little bit darker. And then if you need to, you can bring back a little bit of exposure to fix that. But as far as the actual shot itself, so I think exposure and colors is, kind of cement, like it's important, but the shot itself is better. It's a good shot. You started the motion another way. So that's the same thing with listing videos is you don't want you just want your whole movement to be smooth and consistent. If you mess up or you jerk the camera a little bit, just start that movement over again and it'll be much, much, much smoother. Like I would have cut it right there. Like it doesn't have to be, each clip doesn't have to be super long. So with that shot, I think you're filming in either 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second. You can see a lot of you walking like that, especially right there. So if you film in 60 frames per second and you just do like a standard push in or pull out or move side to side, like I see a lot of newer real estate videographers make this mistake where they feel like they have to cover large distances or do large takes all at once. You don't have to. Like I don't have a good aspect, like a good sense of what this house looks like, but let's take this doorway, for example. If I wanted to establish this room, I would just push in, like my back foot would be right here. The camera would be like about right here. And then I'd push in like to where maybe my feet are right here, just so I'm like pushing in, showing the room, establishing the room, and then move on to the other side or, whatever corners there are or features that you want to highlight. I wouldn't do these type of panning shots. This is okay. So I would have skipped this shot, how it all goes. And then I would have done this one because essentially it's the same shot, the fireplace, this door, it's the same thing over again. So I would have cut the first one and just used that one. Also with this one, I would have held that motion for a while, but then you immediately like stand up like you're about to film something else. So pushing in a little bit like for a longer period of time will give you a better result rather than looking like you lost interest in the fireplace halfway through the shot and decided to keep it. I would just skip immediately to this shot and nix the last one. Again, you don't need those panning motions. You can just push in from the doorway, and it's fine to show like door frames. It's totally fine if you beginning of your shot shows a door frame and then you push into the room to establish it. You don't need to do the walking motion where you show the windows and, you know, pan to the left to show the rest of the room. Like for this room, if you didn't want to do the corner establishing shot, you could have just done a push in straight on to where your camera's directly facing this wall. And then I would drop the exposure a little bit just so you can see more out the windows. Again, an iPhone shooting in HDR mode would do a fantastic of making it pretty clear out these windows. That's fine. Back to the subject of what frame rate you're filming in. So I'm pretty sure you're filming in 24 or 30 frames per second, especially just because you can see the steps that you're taking. If you film in 60 frames per second and you edit it on a 30 FPS timeline, this is maybe going to go over a lot of your heads, but just watch it over again. 60 FPS frame rate, 30 FPS timeline, slow the footage down by 50%. For every 1 second you film that you get like a good shot, you get 2 seconds of usable footage, and 2 seconds is a perfectly fine clip length, or 4 seconds or whatever at the minimum. So if you just get 1 second, or let's be generous, let's say you get 2 seconds of non like walking motion, then that means you actually get 4 seconds of a usable clip that doesn't have the walking up and down motion. That's fine. I would have moved a little bit further to the right. It is fine to show door banisters, but there's nothing stopping you from just going a little bit. Like, I understand you probably didn't want to be visible in the mirror, but you could get a little bit further over without doing that. Sometimes I'll even get on my knees and then just lift the camera up so that my head or arms aren't going to be visible. You just barely see, like you'd almost be able to see the top of the camera. And for small bathrooms like that, you don't need to show anything else. Just showing the vanity is good enough. So cut it right there. Don't need a detail shot of that. So right there, I would have cut it a little bit earlier so you can see the start of your motion. I would have started the clip right here so it just carries over into the rest of the scene rather than being able to see it start. And again, being able, like shooting in 60 FPS and editing it on a 30 FPS timeline and interpreting the footage is going to immediately increase the production value of this by tenfold. I promise you. Also, I wouldn't do 2 shots of the dining room. I would prefer this shot over the previous shot. Don't really need to focus on the hutch too much. That's a mistake that I see a lot of newer real estate photographers make as well, is they focus a lot on what's inside the house rather than the house itself. So this was actually told to me one time. I did a listing video where I did a lot of detail shots and I was super proud of the way it looks. And the realtor came back to me and she was like, "Can we make it more about the house?" And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Focus more on the house, not so much the detail shots of like the wall decorations, because if someone is seeing, you know, something specific in the house, like let's say this rose in the bathroom, let's say for some reason a potential buyer hates this with all their might, they would never have this kind of style, and they're the type of petty person that would, like, they'd see this and they'd be turned off and they can no longer see themselves occupying the house. So when in my pre-shoot checklist that I send to my clients, I let them know is like, it's fine to have stuff in the house, but what we want to avoid is anything that's personalized. The whole goal of real estate photography and videography and marketing these homes is to be able to help potential buyers imagine their own stuff in the house. Does that make sense? It's a little overexposed as well. Check your white balance. You'll want to manually change your white balance for every single room in the house that you're shooting. This one looks a little bit too purple. This one looks a little bit too green. So you'll really want to dial in, making sure that your white balance is correct for each and every room that you go into, and also paying more attention to your exposure meter, your metering. It should say like -1.0.m.m or something like that, depending on what camera you have. It's always better to err on the side of underexposing by a little bit, like -0.7, -0.3, or whatever, versus like 1.0 or 2.0 above, because you can't recover highlights that are blown out. You can recover shadows that were underexposed. Although if you don't have a great camera, then you're going to get a lot of noise. So just do your best to expose as properly as you can. If you have the ability to put on zebras in your camera's viewfinder or your monitor, put those on, set up that, and it'll be able to tell you when something is overexposed. So the first clip, I would show this and then cut it, and then immediately cut to this one and cut it. So in your email that you sent me, you said that you're focusing on trying to cut down the times of your listing videos. That's how you can do it, is just show what you're trying to show and cut it. You don't have to keep going on it. I'd start this shot right here just to show that you're going up, make it last 2 seconds. That progression didn't really make sense. I'm not sure where this is in the house. Is this the kitchen? That's something that you want to be careful of too, is making sure that your clips are in sequence. So you go to the, like, you're showing the kitchen and then you show this room, and then all of a sudden we're back in the kitchen again. So that doesn't make too much sense. And then we're going back up the stairs. So you want to make it as cohesive as possible. So let's start right there. I would do an establishing shot of this room before you show out the windows. I see why you would want to show everything in the hallway, but this shot, pressing in for 3 seconds, just going towards, whatever rooms, you can see how many doors there are, so you don't need to show what every single one is, because you're going to show those rooms anyways. You can just do a press in shot. I think what you need to focus on the most, with as far as like clip length goes, is just showing what you want to show and moving on to the next thing. Like, I would have cut that clip already. I frequently do panning shots like this just to show the whole room. Like, I'd cut it there, and then I'd start from here, cut it there. I wouldn't show that. That's scary. Cut it here. I would have started a little bit more to the right. We don't care too much about the toilet. What most people care about is like the bathtub and vanity. Everybody knows that there's going to be a toilet. So like that, where that shot ended is where I would have began it, and just push in a little bit for 2 seconds, and then you're done. And then I'd cut it right here. And then I'd cut it right here. Something I'm noticing over and over again is that you start a clip and then you start moving. If you just move over, like if you cut the beginning of the clip and then just start moving before the clip even starts, you'll start noticing a better end result. Like right there, cut it just a little bit further in. Like I would start that clip right there even. That's a nice drone shot. Much more smooth, consistent inputs. I would even opened with this drone shot. Overall, I'd say, honestly, 6 out of 10. I know that seems a little bit low. You do have things to work on, mainly exposure, learning how to get smooth, consistent inputs where, like I said, if you're walking and you move the camera a little bit, start over. The more you do that, the more you'll get used to just being able to hold the same movement. Like if you can do this, hell, I'll even demonstrate it a little bit. Okay, so this looks really silly, but the main thing that we want to do is if you're starting a shot, just do your best to be as slow as possible. So pushing, smooth motion, or you can start the gimbal right here and move to the side like that, being very just smooth consistency. I know that looked really silly, but if you're filming in 30 frames per second or 24 frames per second, then you're going to see that movement a lot. So you want to make sure you're filming in 60 frames per second, you slow it down by 50%, and you're focusing on ninja walking just to get really smooth inputs. try and cap your clips a lot shorter. Just establish the shot, move on to the next one. Establish the shot, move on to the next one. I'm super keen to see what you make next time, so feel free to send it over. I love doing this kind of stuff, so if you have any pictures, videos that you want to send me to review publicly, please do so. I had a ton of fun with this, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next one. Goodbye.